Alright, got some more randomness for you today. This is my OneWheel. For those of you that don't know, this is a OneWheel GT by Future Motion. It is a self-balancing personal electric vehicle. A lot of people say it kind of feels like a snowboard. I snowboard, and to me this is a pretty unique experience. It's a really awesome sensation. I've really been enjoying the board. And since I've gotten it, this is completely stock. Well, almost completely stock. Since I got it, I've been collecting parts and planning on holding off on installing them until I get extremely comfortable on the stock platform. And then I was going to change each part individually to see exactly, how each part makes it feel different and makes it perform different. But with some of the recent regulations, regulatory bodies, and some recent software updates, I'm going to go ahead and put these parts on. I'll get into more detail as to why exactly I want to go ahead and do that before the software update hits. And I wanted to go through all the parts that I'm going to install, and we'll walk through the complete transformation of everything. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at the OneWheel itself, and I'll show you guys kind of what I'm talking about as far as its features and what I'm going to change on it. So this is the OneWheel GT. Like I said, this is almost completely stock. For those that aren't as familiar with these, they weigh about 35 pounds. It's got a 750 watt 3 horsepower motor in it that can do 20 miles an hour up to 32 miles depending on terrain, and it can handle up to a 275 pound payload. There's a companion app that goes with this on your phone, which allows you to use digital shaping to kind of change the dynamics of how the board handles, how flowy, how tight, how aggressive it is. And that software is part of the reason I'm going to go ahead and upgrade. The newest update in that software allows for custom shaping. One of the parts that I'm going to put on this board is going to change the angles of the sensors. So once you install those, you have to re-level the board, which you won't be able to do after that software update. So I'm going to go ahead and get my parts on, get the board re-leveled, then update the software, and I'll be able to have the custom shaping on there. Let's go over some basic features on the stock board. It's got 2 concave foot pads here. I went with the carbon fiber fender. These are green rail guards that just help protect the aluminum rails. Flip it over. I went with the stock treaded tire. There is a stock slick option, and now there's a performance tire option as well. I do have the Fangs on here, which this is a stock bumper. It's just a piece of plastic. Normally this would be the same on the front side, but I have the Fangs, which add these little wheels just to help you if you happen to be in a nose down situation. They're a little bit controversial whether people say they help or they hurt. I've used them so far a few times, and they've helped me out of a couple sticky situations, so I'm going to go ahead and keep those on when I do this modification. It's got a mag handle here, is what they call it. I'll probably be removing that through this process as well. And now, the fun part, let's get into the parts. So these are the parts that I'm going to be putting on, some of them. We'll start over here. We got the Tech Rails Halo foot pads. These are, I think, 1.5 inches wider than the stock and have a slightly less aggressive concave. Everyone says that this makes it feel much more like a snowboard, and I have size 12.5 or 13 shoe. So on the stock, my toes and my heel hang off the edge. This will allow me to have a lot better contact with the entire board. To go with that, I've got trying to figure out the different color combos that I wanted to have. And so these are the underlay, either gold, black, or these are just clear. I'm probably going to go with gold, which was my original color combo. I plan on down the road getting a gold billet wheel for it as well. This is a version 3 sensor. It is a little bit more sensitive than the stock sensor, and this will go with the Halo pads. I will use the actual connector from the stock pad and the stock sensor and install this pad. It's got its own adhesive on the back, so I'll install that on there, and that will go up underneath the collar, which will be capped by 4mm thick hex tape. You can't really see the hex pattern here yet, but there are hexagons all throughout this, so the gold will shine through in the gaps in the hexagon. Then moving over, these are flight fins. They go on top of the board and allow your feet to hook up under them. So these will go on top of the board like this, and then this will bend over top and replace my stock fender. And this just pops in and out, so you can remove it if you want to ride fenderless. Moving over here, we got Lifesavers. These will go around the rim of the tire and help protect it against rocks, scratches, anything that might hurt the bead. Then one of the big upgrades that everyone says is amazing, this is the Enduro tire. And the Enduro tire is supposed to completely transform the way this thing performs. Really looking forward to getting this thing on there and seeing how it does. To go with that, Armadillo's tire sealant. A lot of people don't run tire sealant, but I'm gonna go ahead and squirt a bottle of Armadillo's in it. One other little part is, this is the Sure Start Pro, which allows for different front sensor uses. I'm not even gonna get into the details of that right now because it looks like the new software that they released kind of makes this obsolete, so I probably won't be installing this. Plus, this Sure Start Pro will void your warranty. So I'm gonna go ahead and just set this to the side, maybe install it at some point, maybe not, I don't know. This is a 3D printed part from Tech Rails that connects to the main plug and the chassis just to help keep vibrations from letting that plug rattle loose. Everyone says this is a must-have. It's very inexpensive, nice quality. This is just hardware for the flight fins, and these are the mounting brackets for the flight fins. I do have one other part that I'm really excited about, and it's the reason that I'm trying to do this before the update comes out, and I'll show you that right now. This is probably what I'm most excited about installing. The rail guards might give it away a little bit, but these are the Tech Rails 357T skeleton rails. They come with axle hangers and titanium hardware. These are called 357s because they give a 3-degree upsweep on the front and a 7-degree upsweep on the rear of the board. You can kind of see how they're angled. And because of those angles, it changes the angle that the sensors sit at when the board is level. So once you install these, you have to re-level the board so it's not riding in a weird orientation. These are just the 3M adhesive that I'm going to use to attach the carbon fiber rail guards to the, oh, got those backwards, to attach the carbon fiber rail guards to the actual rails themselves. And those will go on just like that with the adhesive, give it a nice cool look. I know it'll protect the aluminum as well, but carbon fiber doesn't really take a beating quite like the plastic covers do, so I'm going to try to keep them decent, but you know, a battered board is a used board, and a used board is a happy board. This is a little shim that's used for the hangers. The hangers plus the rails allow for multiple ride height options. You've got 2 adjustments here and 2 adjustments here, giving you a total of 4 different ride heights you can choose from. I'm probably going to completely slam mine out and make it as low as possible for added stability. And like I said, the titanium bolts that'll go with it. So I'm going to go ahead and go over the tools that I'm going to be using to do all of this. I'm going to do a couple extra things while I'm in here, and then we're going to get into the board disassembly. So this is a quick overview of the tools that I'm going to be using for this whole job. I've got a couple X-Acto knives here with some extra blades to cut the adhesive for the rail guards. I've got a bunch of blades because cutting that adhesive gums up the blades real quick. just a utility knife just in case, some Q-tips for cleaning, a 3/8 inch ratchet with this is a T47 socket for the actual rails, or the axle bolts. The axle bolts actually require a Torx Plus 45. I don't have one right now. It's down at my other shop, which is like an hour away. So I'm just going, since I'm just taking them out one time, I'm not going to put them back in with it. I'll use a T47. It should be able to get them out. Then I've got the T25 on a screwdriver. This is for all the other small bolts for the bumpers and sensors and all that. Then the new bolts, the titanium bolts over here for the hangers and the axles themselves are hex. So I've got my 6mm and I believe 5mm, yeah, 5mm hex heads for those. So that's why I'm not too concerned about this T47. It's just got to get them out once and then the hex will be going in. Otherwise, I would go ahead and go down and get my TP45. I also have a 3mm hex here to remove the mag handle because I'm pretty sure I'm going to take that off and not put it back on. I've got my torque wrench for torquing the axle bolts down to 18.5 foot-pounds. Some RTV silicone that I plan on sealing up the board with, sealing the plugs and possibly around kind of the fender area to keep some garbage out from in there. Dielectric grease for the plugs, help prevent arcing and just keep it a little bit extra waterproof. Glass cleaner for cleaning stuff up, paper towels, and lastly some isopropyl alcohol. And I'll use that to just make sure everything's nice and clean before I silicone anything. So that's really all the tools I'm going to be using for this. And with that, I guess it is time to get into the teardown. So we're going to go ahead and take this thing completely apart. We're going to start by the fender. Got 4 T25s right here. Let's go ahead and take these guys out. Now that those are loose, fender just lifts right off. Go ahead and take these screws and I'll dump them in my little tray here. Fender's off, set that out of the way. Then we'll go ahead and flip this guy over. And we've got 4 up front and 6 in the back. Go ahead and start with the fangs. Normally this would be just a normal bumper here, but I've already got the fangs on it. So I'll go ahead and take these out. And then you'll slide forward on the fender, or the fangs in my case, and that guy comes right off. Set that aside. Time for the rear fender. Same thing. The rear fender just lifts off. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of crap in there. I'll clean all that up before I put it back together. Okay, so the next step is we're going to want to remove the foot pads. So we'll flip it back over and we'll have 2 screws here on either foot pad, and then on the bottom 2 screws here, 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 and here. So we'll start by removing this plug here. This is the sensor plug, so I'll go ahead and just unscrew this guy. I can get my fingers down in there, and then it just pops right out. So now the wires are disconnected to the sensor. I'll go ahead and take these guys out. These are the fender itself, and these are the front head, rear head. Flip back over, rear foot head. And that'll lift right off. That's the stock foot pad. Front foot pad, and you can see the connector there that we just disconnected from the controller box. I will be reusing this part of the connector for the sensor on the halo, and I'll show that when we go to work on the halo. So now we're down to just the rails. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit and we'll be right back. Okay, so now that I've got the table cleaned up a little bit from the mess, we're going to go ahead and take this rail off on this side. So we'll start with the 4 T25s here. So we got 4 rail screws. Off. We're going to go ahead and come down here and take these cable covers off. They're also T25s. Just straight up. And now we're ready to take the axle bolts off. Now this, I would not recommend to anyone. I'm using the incorrect bit. I'm using a T47 instead of the TP25, just because I don't want to drive 2 hours to get the correct bit that I have. So I'm going to just be very gentle with these. Man, that's on there. And I'm putting pressure on it to make sure it doesn't strip out. And then there we go. That one's loose. Same on that one. That one's loose. And again, if I was reusing these screws, I would not recommend the method I'm using. This is, like I said, I wanted to save 2 hours. So, take these guys out. And once these come loose, the axle block will just fall out. But now, both axle bolts are out, and this rail just pops right off. So that's a factory rail. When I took it off, I didn't think about this previously, but where'd it go? Your little charge plug will pop out. So make sure to hang on to that, if you have one. And then we'll go ahead, I'll show you what we're working with here. At this stage, I'll go ahead and twist this to the left, loosen it up, and go ahead and unplug the motor. This is that axle block that I was telling you about that just falls off. So that's the mag handle, that won't be going back on. I have the axle blocks from the 357Ts. And then we'll go ahead and flip over to the other rail. Once pulled here, you can screw it on there. Still awesome. And you can't do enough hand away. I'll just make sure. We'll just sit on gently. Just in the back box. Screw. That'll come. Now, we're going to the axles. I'm going to break the screen. Alright. Take it apart. Kind of hard to do, but not break the screen. And when this comes off, that last axle block will just fall down. So now the factory rails are off. So close aside. This is the hub motor assembly with its plug. Go ahead and set that aside. Mag handle, axle block, And then this is the meat and potatoes of it. You're not going to want to disconnect either one of these. These remain together. So this is now fully disassembled. And it is time to start reassembly. The first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is go ahead and mount the Enduro onto the hub. So we'll start with that. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys all the pieces real quick, kind of laid out, and what it all looks like completely disassembled. And then we'll get to swapping the tire out. So these are all the components completely disassembled. Hub and motor with the cable, axle blocks and mag handle, bumpers, or in my case, bumper and fangs, factory rail, controller and battery, front sensor and foot pad, rear foot pad, and the fender, as well as the little charge plug. So that's all the components. You got the little cable covers over here, as well as axle bolts and the rest of the hardware. This is what a completely disassembled one wheel looks like. I'm going to clear this table off. We're going to bring this guy front and center and start by getting the stock tire off. Okay, let's take this tire off. So you got to take the valve stem out. So that means you got to put cable side down. Whenever you're putting the cable side down, you're going to want to put some spacers under it so it's not squishing that cable when you set it down. You can use blocks of wood. I just happen to have 3 rolls of duct tape laying around, so that's what I'm going to use right now. Set that on there so the cable's got nice and free movement. They're nice and centered. Take your valve stem cap off. I happen to have a little metal float life one on here. So we're going to want to go ahead and take this valve stem out. They include a valve stem tool with the armadillos. You just put it on there. You can see there's a little silver tab in there that'll line up with this groove. Screw that on there. I've already let the air out, so there's no more air in it. And then turn that, and that should unscrew your valve stem cap. And that's what the valve stem core looks like right there. Set that aside. So for the real fun part is breaking the bead on this stock tire, which I've heard is a real pain. You can use a tool called a bead breaker. I've got tire sealant all over me now. You can use an actual bead breaker. I've seen guys use 2x4s. I'm just going to try using some brute force here. So you can see the bottom bead is completely off now. So that's good. This is where wooden blocks would be better than rolls of duct tape. I may end up walking up the driveway and getting some. Give it one more shot here for good measure. There we go. And we're off. So I've heard the stock tire is a lot harder to do that with than aftermarket tires. For the hardest part is to get the rim or the tire off the rim itself. For this, I'm going to push it down and try to use the narrowest part of the hub to create a gap there. I just have a handle here of my wire strippers. It's rubberized, so it's not going to hurt it. And you're going to peel it up like that. And now that you've got it up over the tire, we're going to try to peel it the rest of the way up. Oh, come on. There we go. There we go. We're close. We're real close. There we go. Now we're off. So that bead is broken. Now to get it off this one, I'm just gonna use the edge of the table and send it off. That blue factory sealant will get everywhere. Just got all over my floor. So I will take just a minute to go ahead and clean that sealant up. So I got the wheel all cleaned up, all the sealant removed from the hub. There's some hard stuff on there, but I'll just ignore that. Now we're gonna install the Lifesavers and the good old Enduro. The Lifesavers, I'm gonna go ahead and start with the first one. I'm gonna do the motor plug side. You want the Float Life logo facing outward. I'm gonna line it up so it's aligned with the OneWheel logo. That's not critical, but I like the details like that. So you're just gonna start working it into the channel. And then once it starts getting tight, and take your palms and force it past the rim, like that. And once you force it past it, then you can slowly bring it up back into the channel. No need to heat them up or anything like that. People say you got to do that, but it's as easy as that. They're on. It's on there. So then we're gonna get the handy duct tape spacers. Probably use wood if you've got it. I've got some. I'm just being lazy. And then you want to hold off on this Lifesaver until you get the tire installed. Keep this in the camera a little bit better. So now when you go to install the tire on it, it's a directional tire, so you want to make sure it's going the right way. It's got a couple arrows on it that show you the rotation. A lot of people try to put the tire directly on the wheel. I find it easier. Take the wheel, put it on the tire. So with the motor side facing you, as long as the arrows are also up, you're going to be lined up, and you just push that guy in and kind of rotate it in there, and it drops right in. So now you got to set the bead on the other side. This is where the handy dandy duct tape comes into play. I would recommend using wood if you got it, but I'm being lazy. So once you get here, you're just going to use a little bit of finesse and a little bit of force. Make sure your motor cable isn't being pinched in any way. It's free down here. And then you're just going to kind of roll the bead on the rim. And then we're on. And at this point, you'll want to install the other Lifesaver. I'm going to go ahead and align the Float Life logo with the valve stem. Start getting that channel on, just like the other one. Push the tire out of the way if you need to. And we're going to do the same, go too far, and then back it off into the channel. Come on. On the side. For a little bit, see if this one little spot that was giving me problems. Roll that on up. Lifesaver on. Now it's time to set these beads. So I will go charge up my air compressor and I will be back. Okay, I've got my compressor ready to go to set the bead. One thing I didn't mention earlier, it's not necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and throw some ratchet straps around this just to prevent overstretching of the tire if the beads don't want to set at a reasonable PSI. I've never set the beads on an Enduro, so I'm not sure what kind of PSI it's going to be wanting. but I'll just wrap a couple of these around it. I'm going to throw a little air in it to get it, you know, not as deformed. And then before I go to actually set the bead, I'll go ahead and get these snugged up around it. I'm going to go ahead and get them kind of in place, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got these 2 ratchet straps on here just loosely in place. I just wanted to get them in place off camera because it was kind of an ordeal to untangle them. Now, we're going to go ahead and turn my air on. Now we're going to set these beads. So I'll go ahead and give it some air. As you can see, the ratchet straps tightened right up real quick. Go ahead and leave them free hanging. We're going to try again. We're at 6 PSI now, 7, 12, 18, 20. Go ahead and get these guys, make sure they're actually doing their job here. And again, these are just to keep the tire from over expanding this way while these beads are set. We're at 29, 32, there's 1, 36, there's the other, 38 PSI. Go ahead and drop these back down, letting all the air back out of the tire. Make sure the beads are set on both sides, which they are. We are now at 0 PSI, and I can take these off. So now, we have both beads set, and we're ready to reinstall our valve stem core. Good old armadillos. Everyone says it's the way to go. So I'm going to take this guy, cut just the tip off of the end of the bottle there. And we're going to stick this right down in there and give her some squeezes. And again, some people say this is unnecessary. Some people run it dry. I'm just doing this out of an abundance of caution. Did we get a clog? Looks like it clogged up, but we got most of it in there. So now that the sealant's in there, we'll go ahead and reinstall our valve stem core. And now, let's give it 20 PSI. Dead on 20 right there. So that's ready to go. We'll reinstall our little valve stem cap. And there is one Enduro tire with Lifesavers ready to go. Now it's time to start putting this thing back together. So now it's time to install these axle blocks that came with the 357Ts. I did notice, and I don't know if this is intentional or what, but on the retainer screws that go in this way, this is a 3/16 SAE Allen key, and it fits a lot better than the 4.5 millimeter. 5 millimeter won't fit, so it seems that this bolt is SAE, and then the small bolts for the cover here are 2 millimeter metric. So that's kind of strange, but I have what I need, so I'm not going to complain. I'll go ahead and take these off. These are just the little retainer covers. And if you notice, these axle blocks are different. You've got one for the motor cable side and one for the non-motor cable side. Because I'm using a stock GT hub, the included shim that is required no matter what will go on the motor cable side. So I'll set that in there. I'll get these covers off and we'll get these installed. So now that that's off, go ahead and make sure our shim is in place. And we'll go ahead and get this bad boy on there. You just want to be careful not to pinch that motor cable. And that should set down just like that. Our shim is nice and aligned. These are the original bolts that were for the hub. These will no longer be in use. And instead, we'll use our titanium. The flat head ones will go in this part, and the smaller diameter, taller bolts will be the actual rail bolts. So we'll get this aligned. Just get one finger tight in there just to help keep it aligned. This is where I'm going to add some blue Loctite. Just a little bit on the end of the thread there. Get that guy in there. There you go. And it's like I really finger tight. Take this guy out. Get some Loctite. This also will work with get those nice and snug down. And then our little retainer, I'll go ahead and put Loctite on that too. It slides in here. And I really wish I had one of the ball end Allen keys here. I've got, like I said, I got a set at my shop. Just didn't think this through and bring the right tools with me. So this will be a little bit slow. I'll go ahead and speed the video up here. Get that guy nice and snug. Go ahead and make sure these guys are nice and snug. We can go ahead and put our cable retainer cover back on there. Are these the same? Okay, these are identical, so it doesn't matter which side goes on. Oh, just a speck of lock on these, so these are really fun, so I don't put much on there. A little snug. So that guy's on there. Now, we'll leave it. Again, one tight. Give it a finger tight. Go ahead and slow down. So now our hangers are in place. They're Loctited in. Should be good to go. We're going to leave this cover off until we get it on the board because that's where the controller cable is going to rest. Go ahead and I'm going to leave that on so it doesn't get sticky stuff everywhere. But there are the actual Tech Rails hangers those are the two ride heights. And I'll show you real quick how that corresponds. That would be the highest setting, which I'm not sure why you'd want to do, but to each their own. I think that's 7/8 higher than stock. That would be a 1/4 inch higher than stock. That would be a 1/4 inch lower than stock, and 7/8 lower than stock. And that's where I'm going to put it. So those are, you just pick which hole here and which hole here, and those are your 4 different ride heights. We're going to go with the lowest setting. So we are good to go there. I think the next step is going to be getting the carbon fiber rail guards onto the rails themselves. It's going to be a bit of a tedious process because I've got to cut out all the adhesive for the skeleton. So let me get that set up and we'll be back in a jiffy. Oh, I forgot this guy on this one. This is the retaining screw. So we're going to put just a little bit of Loctite on him and slide it on in. Very tight. Now we should be good to go. So now I'm going to set this up to put the carbon rail guards on. So we're about to install the carbon fiber rail guards onto the 357Ts. I'm going to go ahead and do this before I put it together because I think it'll be better than trying to do it once it's already together. So my plan is, this is the double-sided 3M adhesive that it comes with. I'm planning on peeling off one side, sticking the rail guard to it, and then with my handy dandy X-Acto knife, I'm going to trim all of the skeleton regions out, and then it should have the perfect adhesive on the back where I can then peel it off and stick it to the rail. I've got them oriented correctly on the rails so I know which side needs to have the adhesive on it. I'm going to clean everything with some isopropyl alcohol before getting to the actual sticking down of anything. I'll go ahead and clean off this side before I stick it down and trim it, and then once I go to stick it here, I'll go ahead and wipe this down with alcohol, let it dry, and then carefully place it on the rail itself. So I'm going to speed this up because this is going to be a bit tedious, and hopefully it turns out well. As I'm finishing up this first rail, wanted to give you a couple tips. If your blade starts feeling dull, change it. They're cheap, get a bunch of them. So far, to cut this far, I just got these 2 little sections left. I've burnt 4 blades. This is the 5th blade. This is a fresh blade, and I just wanted to show you a couple tips. One of the things I find helpful is rather than trying to move your X-Acto knife around the shape, plant your X-Acto knife. I've got a cutting mat here. Plant your X-Acto knife in one position and then just rotate the blade as you move the actual rail or the rail guard, and just rotate the blade around the corners and keep that guard moving rather than moving the blade. It seems to cut this adhesive a little bit cleaner than when I was trying to actually move the blade. Got a little bit away from the rail on this side. Oh, and there goes my tip. And some of these tight areas, you do have to move the blade. There's really no other choice. This is the most technical little section, I think, out of the whole rail. It's around this plug here. And don't, if it's still attached, don't force it because you can actually stretch the adhesive and it'll pull it up from the other side of the rail. So I just like to gingerly kind of pull as I cut away any little stragglers that are still hanging on. And sometimes, like right here, I'll go ahead and just make a cut straight across just to remove this little excess piece. And then again, for this circle, I'm going to go ahead and plant my blade and just rotate the blade and move the rail around the radius or the circumference of that circle. And then it just pops right out. Final little section. Go ahead and same thing, moving the rail rather than the blade. Rotate and curve around and bring it on back. And this blade is about spent. So when you buy these from Tech Rails, they do include X-Acto knives with a pack of blades, and I use all 5 blades per rail. I do have 2 X-Acto knives with 5 blades each, so I'll use the next 5 blades on the other side. And see, here's an example. I don't know how well you can see, there's a little straggler here where it's trying to pull from the rail. So I'll just lift up on that and go ahead and cut nice and close to the rail, let that lift up without trying to stretch it. Redo that little cut. Another little straggler there. And then I'll just go clean up any of the edges that might have a little bit of adhesive sticking out. When it's on the board, you're probably not going to see this, and I'm probably being way too detailed, but like I said earlier, I like the details. So we'll clean it up nicely. And then there we go, there's the first rail, and now it has adhesive on the back. So when we go to install this, I'm going to go ahead and cut the other rail out first, get it all trimmed up, then we just peel this back, stick it on, and we'll be good to go. That guy goes right there just like that. This one on here. I'm going to clean this guy up with acetone, or rubbing alcohol, and get the adhesive on this one. Okay, so I got that all trimmed up. So now both of these have adhesive on one side. So I'll peel this red off and stick them in their proper locations on the rails. After, of course, I wipe these guys down with a little bit of alcohol just to make sure it adheres well. But that'll go there, and that will go there. So I'm going to clean this table up, get all the sticky stuff away, and then we'll go ahead and clean these up and get them stuck down. Okay, so I've got them all trimmed up. They've got the adhesive on them. So I'll go on that rail. Let's go on this rail. Let me get the rest of the adhesive off my fingers. And then we'll go ahead and start, until I busted some knuckles with that tire. I'd highly recommend using the proper tools for the tire. Get a debeater or a bead breaker tool, and I'm going to use a microfiber for this. Making sure the surface is dust free and grease free. And then I will take my rail with the adhesive, make sure I've got it in the right orientation. And then I'll start by peeling this backing off. First, I'm going to go ahead and really push it on there. Just make sure that that's fully seated on the rail. It should be, but just double check so it doesn't peel the whole thing up. And carefully do that. We'll right things up here and there. And that was the one. Just peel it off, keep it back in. I use my X-Acto knife to clean up just the little bitty pieces of red that are still on there from having to make multiple little detailed cuts. I just backwards to help you find little pieces of backing off that stuck on there from the we have little, several touches, little pieces. That is little slides on there. So that looks good. Now, I want to line this up as good as possible. And there we go. One rail protector installed. Carbon rail protector on. Number 2. Again with the alcohol to get the grease off. Not really grease on these, but just sure nice on here. Yeah, make sure that taste cracks. There we go. Just really press it on there. Good to go. So we're going to just seems to be almost all come off. Pull that guy off. So as I was sure these started, once you get started, pretty easy with the cutting. You know, I my X-Acto here. And a little bit chunks off, it might give you away. Little pieces right off there. Good to go. Line it as best as possible. And there we go. Carbon protector 2 on. So now we've got the carbon fiber rail guards on the 357Ts, and it's time to start reassembling the board. So I want to take a quick second to show the difference in the tread pattern of the Enduro versus the stock treaded. It looks like the Enduro is a little bit more bubbly, but that's because this is on the hub with the Lifesavers, and this is completely deflated off the hub. But slightly different tread pattern. The compound is completely different though. This is so much softer. It won't have the same mileage, but everyone says that, man, this is just the way to go. So really looking forward to feeling how this guy is. I mean, just by pressing on the rubber, you can feel how much softer this compound is. So really looking forward to that, seeing how it responds both on the pavement and on the trails. Once I get done with dinner, we'll start putting this thing back together. Now that I've got everything cleaned up, the carbon's on, we're ready to put this thing together. So we're gonna start with the cable side here. We've got the rails. This is the rear. This is the rear towards me. This is the front. So we're going to start with this rail here and go ahead. Set this out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and connect the power button side. screws here. These are the T25s. Get our Loctite. Put a dab of Loctite on there. Go ahead and get these lined up and just start them finger tight. So there's no risk of cross threading or anything like that. Get that guy in there. Another dab of Loctite. And get that guy in there. Once I got him started, go ahead and take my screwdriver. And I'm just going to snug everything up to start, and then I'll give it the final kind of tightening. Just want to get it all so it holds the shape. I have one here is one holes that we don't outside. Now, snuggle 4 of these guys down. And we now are starting to have a chassis. So we'll come over here. Like I said, we're starting with the battery box side, or the battery cable side. I'll take this guy, set it down right there. We'll want to line this guy up with our desired ride height, which is going to be the lowest setting, which is right there. So we'll take our titanium screws, give them a dash of Loctite, drop them in place, and again, I'll go finger tight for now. That's the wrong size. Go in there. There's one. Let's go finger tight now. So get these on. So that'll go there. The other side goes on here. Everything is looking aligned. We're going to start with the axle bolts again. Dash of Loctite here and here. Get this lined up at the lowest setting. We're using axle bolts and titanium 4 screws down everything, and I'm loosening everything down. These axle bolts, I think stock is 25 pounds. Titanium, I think, 12 pounds. I'm going to probably use the 20 pounds. These guys in. Take a little bit of this to get things one just right. Get rid of lots of it very, very easily. All across there. So I'm just going to work on this. It's going nicely. There's on there. Okay. This should go down. So this one goes out now. We'll put problems. All tight. Let's get started. Stay snug. Okay, going good. It's on. It's very snug, but snug. Just enjoy things right up. And now, we're going to tighten these axles. So we'll do with that. So I'm just going to tighten them on my hand. Nice and tight. Nice and tight. This side. Nice and tight. That side. So now we have our new chassis. So I'll flip this over. And one of the things I want to do while I'm in here is go ahead and silicone around these plugs. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Gonna unscrew the little nuts here. They're just kind of hand tight on Unscrew that little plastic nut. I don't know if I'll be able to get the small one with my fingers. There we go. So once those guys are off, I'm going to go ahead and take my RTV silicone that I had a minute ago. What to do with it? Oh, right here. So I've got some RTV silicone here. I'm just going to put it on a Q-tip. I've seen guys use syringes, which seems to be a good way to do it. I don't happen to have a syringe. So I'm just going to smear some silicone around the base of these with a Q-tip. And that should help waterproof it a little bit. There are ways, I think it's called, oh, I forget the term. There's a term, and guys that make a kit for waterproofing that allow you to vacuum test it and everything like that. I'm not going to go through all that. I don't really ride in the wet that much. I just figured while I'm here, might as well. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take a little Q-tip with some alcohol on it and just clean up the threads, clean up the plugs, make sure there's not too much excess silicone there, because it'll make it more difficult to remove these. So that's all cleaned up. Then I'm going to go ahead and take this, set it aside for now. So we've got the halos. We're going to use the gold. So we got that one and that one, and then the two foam hex grips. In order to install this sensor onto the front pad here, we're going to need the plug from the factory sensor. So I'll take this time to go ahead and show you guys the difference in a halo and a factory pad. You can clearly see the size difference in the pads. And this is what I'm looking forward to. It's slightly less concave. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. It's slightly less concave, much wider. It actually slopes outward rather than inward. I hope I'm getting that angle right. But basically we need to come here and take this section of this plug off. So go ahead and carefully pop this guy off. There we go, break it off. Okay. Let's just close up. I don't know if that works for me. Get off the steering there. Now we try. There we go. Start pulling this. Feel hot basically. Off. Here's some shielding on wire. There's a ground speed. Honestly, I'm going to turn this into the wheel so you see the wheels and try. Close that. Pull it down, and that allows us to expose the cable here. Pull it off, and there's our sensor cable. So now we can discard this. Don't need this anymore. There's still the female side of the plug in there if I did want to reuse it. I'll just leave the rest of that glue on there. So now for this sensor placement, I'm going to need to grab a pen, so I'll be back in half a second. So for the sensor, to get the placement right, you're going to go ahead and slide the plug down up underneath, then flatten it out. Set that down and push the sensor as far forward as it will go. There's a very slight ridge right here that lines up with these two kind of indents. So that's perfectly where you want it to be. You want to get it centered as much as possible. And then I'll go ahead and take my Sharpie and go ahead and just mark the corners. And that will give me a reference point for when I take the adhesive backing off and install this sensor. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that out. Probably should have cleaned this before I put the marker on it. Use microfiber again. Again, I'm just cleaning this to make sure the adhesive adheres and there's no grease or dust or anything like that on the pad itself. So I'm just giving a nice So now we can peel the backing off of this sensor. And we'll use our marks to line this bad boy up just perfectly. And we're going to start at the top. Get those guys down as perfect as can be. And we're just going to slowly work it down, making sure there's no air bubbles. And we'll work out from the center on either side. Again, making sure there's no air bubbles. Work it down. No air bubbles on this side. And now our sensor is perfectly in place with our original marks there. We'll just take the ribbon cable, pop it down there, and we're good to go. Now, you can plug this guy back in. Ribbon cable is in. Tuck that guy back in its channel there. Make sure that's nice and snug. And now we have a front sensor. The next step will be to install the gold overlay. And to do that, we're just going to line up the corners and go from this direction forward. Again, making sure to work out all the air bubbles. Going to go ahead and wipe this down one more time now that I've had my grubbies all over it. Just give a nice quick degreasing with the alcohol. Get around the edges just so it doesn't peel up in the future. And now I'm going to lay gold underlay down. So now that we've got a corner up, You go ahead and line that corner up. And get that started just a little bit. And go ahead and peel the whole back side off. Oh, the backing ripped. Dang it. This is what I'm getting right now because it's wrinkle. It's backing ripped. It's backing out just on the final parts. That's not quite. It's not backing in place. Leave this somewhere in place. God, it's backing up. Water in now. Come to this. One goes best as possible. It's backing for a real work place. Alright, there we go. That'll do it. So we'll come right here. Get this guy down perfectly aligned. I'm just going to work our way up, making sure to not have any wrinkles, because I just introduced a big old wrinkle. Just try this. Fewer holes possible, fewer holes possible. A little bit earlier there, probably won't kill it. Airballs are going good. I want to kind of copy this like concave pad, and the side pads are really difficult to do with this. So I'm going to go. Fortunately, these inserts are perforated, so that's what balls. I'm just going to keep running down. We'll get holes out, pull out like the front. You'll start in the center, and way out in the ring. Careful there, we've got two perforations. Back to everything was. All the way home in the center. Just pull it. Make sure all of the cables are just on this side. Something on the center. And the lower holes are way up close to creations. But that's pretty good. That's not too bad. So that is the gold underlay on the front sensor side foot pad. Then we'll do the same thing on the back foot pad. Alternate, that's what I have. It's not really one, so sort of like manufacturing. It's not able to shelf. I'm sort of, on these. God, dang it. It's so thin. It's hard to work with that. This is how I do it. A little more. Torque over there. I'm going to get out. So, in the corner. Show me how to go. In the corner. Yep, center. All the way out. And the rolls. And pull out. So that's critical. You'll let rolls out. Use the center of the side. Also, so that you down because I'm trying to go with all this indicates. This is going to hold it here. I'm just going to left and center. And there we have it. Both front and rear color pads are on. I can go ahead and install the foam grip tape on one of them. I'm going to hold off on this one because I want to test this sensor and make sure it does work. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and put the grip tape on one of them. Let's start with the rear. So you start by peeling the outside of this 4mm hex tape off. And these are halo pads, so they're the same size front and rear. And then you're going to look and align. Looks good. So what we're going to do is start by just peeling off the backing on the hex areas. We don't want to pull off the backing on the areas between the hex. Now it looks like this one already has lost some backing between the hex. So I'm going to try to kind of put that back into place so that doesn't stay on. So start by peeling off all of the hexes. See the piece back between that's not going to. You can tie it in place.
Unfortunately, this one has to come off. I'm trying to show you how it's easier to get off, and that helps. Let's get perforations right, so don't use them horizontally. So now,
we've got all the hex portions peeled off. I'm going to do another quick little light alcohol wiping just to get any of my hand grease off of there from where I was patting that down. And then we'll take our hex grip and line it up at the back. And then you smack it. And now, probably the most satisfying part of the whole build, the peeling of the hex.
we want to pull the edges of the hex down here. We do not peel it back down. Just grab it across the pad here, and you can see, it's all cold down. Oh, so it's a little backing. So you can actually hex. So peel off that little line, bang, so right there too. So I'm going to try right there too. It'll take time. You can hammer through this. It's pretty simple. Really worrying seeing that hot. That's this button. Man, go in here. Just hold this backing up.
So there you have it. The halo rear pad with the gold underlay. I'm going to do the same on the front, but before I do the front, I'm going to test the sensor just to make sure it does work. I should have tested it before I even put this gold thing on, but didn't do that. Silicone's still curing, so I'm going to take a quick break and let that silicone set up for a little bit longer, and then I will be back. So, one thing I did when I was assembling it that I forgot is the all-important motor plug retainer. This has got to go on before the rail goes on. So I got to pop this rail back off. So we'll take that off. The silicone is set up around the two plugs here. So what I'll do now is take some dielectric grease. And this will help prevent arcing and help waterproof. So I'll just squirt some of that in both plugs. Go ahead and reconnect the motor cable. You want to make sure it's lined up properly, and it should push directly in. I say that, but it's not wanting to do it. There we go. Quarter turn on that, and it's locked into place. That's not going anywhere. So now that that's on, now we can install our handy dandy Tech Rails retainer clip. And this just clips on there and secures to the box there. And it makes sure that that will not back out for any reason. So now that that's done, well, I'm so sorry. My phone died that was recording. I didn't know. So I have done a few more things since the video cut out. I got that rail installed over here with the retainer clip. I did go ahead and install the front pad and hooked up the sensor here. You plug that in, turn that till it clicks. I tested the front sensor and then went ahead and installed the hex grip on the front pad just like I did on the rear pad. Unfortunately, the video was dead when I did the most rewarding part of peeling off the actual hex. But here we are, both pads are on, both rails are on. The sensor is working. I'm gonna go ahead and install the other little cable guide right here. Not a whole lot of room to work here. I'd highly recommend, if you're doing this, get yourself a set of Allen keys that have the ball end, which allows you to tighten things at a slight angle. I have a set, like I said, it's at my other shop. So I'm just working with what I have here. I'm currently in the process of moving my shop that's about an hour away up to this location. So half my tools are down there. Well, 75%, probably 85% of my tools are down there. So I'm working with a slightly limited tool setup here, but it's still possible. That's good to go. So now those are all ready, and we'll go ahead and move on to the next step, which will be the flight fins. So I'm goofy foot, always have been, snowboarding, skateboarding, everything. So I'll go ahead and set mine up like this. You want to go ahead and attach this is all the hardware. You want to go ahead and attach the flight fins. So you get the inch-long guys in the top. You can pretty much push them in. It helps to use the Phillips head to kind of thread them the rest of the way. Then your smaller 5/8 will go on the bottom. And whichever side you're putting them on, you want them towards your toe side. So you wouldn't want it back here. You want it more like this. So then at this point, you'll go ahead and make sure they're in there far enough to grab the nuts. And then just very loosely finger tight these nuts on there. And you want to finger tighten them so you can, once you install the actual fenders, you can adjust this up and down to fit your foot. And then once you get that, because they're lock nuts like that, they've got these teeth on there, and the fenders have these little grooves on there. Once you get it roughly finger tight, and you can still adjust it, then once you get your foot in there on the board, you can put it to the height you want, and then tighten it down with the screwdriver just from the outside. So we're going to go ahead and finish this up. Goes in far enough. You got this work. So get your face at the bottom. I get to just place some more ones. So just in place. Again, make sure it's on the side of the itself. Go ahead and tighten this down. I'm just bare with you. It's not more thing. I'm just turning until I kind of touch the fender. Just the turns. So now you can still adjust these. Let's get further in. Come on. You can put them through there. That's right there. So now we'll take the rear fender and attach the dust guard. It'll click into that slot and that slot, and then you'll feel it kind of click into place, and that'll give me my dust guard for the rear side. So now we are ready to put these suckers on. And you'll get to see both hex guards, or hex grips. So I think that looks pretty sweet. I think that looks pretty sweet. So the rear goes here. Looks like we're gonna have to trim some of these hex grips in order to fit these flight fins on here. So what I'm going to do is kind of get them in place. Okay, so what I've discovered is the flight fins overlap the hex grip here, and it pushes it up 4 millimeters. So what I've done is on this side, I went ahead and secured the flight fins on these back 2 screws just loosely, and then went around the edge with my X-Acto knife and trimmed the hex tape. So now you can see there's a cutout there in the hex tape that the flight fins butt perfectly up against. And that'll let those flight fins sit perfectly flush against the rails. So I'm gonna do that on the other side. I'll go ahead and do that on camera. So I took the long ones just to make it easier. Line flight fins. It's a lot easier to get it done. Good. So down until squishing the pads a little bit. And then I'll give me a nice line to cut up against. Swap this around this way. Take my X-Acto knife. And this is not easy to cut, this hex tape. So you kind of got to use a sawing motion with the X-Acto knife. Just take it nice and slow and saw through just in front of where that flight fin is gonna sit. Okay, so back and talk to the man. We'll just work our way around, that kind of sawing motion. As long as you put your hands through the fins actually, they're a little bit off, you have to test off, just trim it up. Just slowly do it. Like I said, that's not much because it shows your rib. Then it will straight, so forget that. You're bubbling on the other side, there's pressure on the side. Yeah, still going on. Let's score it. That's on motion. Then you can go ahead and take the flight fin back off. And now, try to find where you scored it at the beginning. And go there again, go over it one more time to get a good corner that you can start peeling up. And then as you're peeling it up, you'll notice it wants to hang on. Again, use that kind of scraping, sawing motion. And you should be able to work your way around. What's quick over? I'm just cutting under the foam as I pull to that thing on there. Okay, if I find the first time, remember a few more times. Get started. And you just screw away as you go. Sometimes it's hard to see exactly where you score it. So find where it is. Yeah, it's kind of dull and decent. Just randomly before I start the pad. It's just not cutting anywhere. I have one little piece to go, so hoping it hang on. Install the previous score. Slime motion. Just try to choose your screw. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, because once you put the flight fin back on, you can kind of push it up into place, and there you go. You got your perfect contour for it. All those holes are lined up. So now that we got the little trim job done, these guys can go back on. So what we'll do here, I'm going to clean up, organize just a tad. I'll be right back. We'll slap these flight fins on. So ready to put the flight shield and flight fins on. The flight shield, when you bend it around, it will click into those little notches right there. And that's what holds it in place. So you'll be able to remove it later if you want, reinstall it. It just kind of snaps into place once you bend it over. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to use this with the 357s all the way down. I'm not sure if I'll have clearance, but we'll find out. I had the fenders or the flight fins backwards for whatever reason. I thought the shield was in the back. It's in the front. So now these guys are ready to go. You've got long screws and short screws. The long screws will go in through the foot pad screws, and the short screws will go in just below that, straight into the flight fins. So I need to go ahead and remove the screws for the foot pads that I put in. Get discarded. We'll take our front flight fin with the splash guard mounted. We'll go ahead and fit that right into place. Going to start with the long ones. Just get started a little, please. Come here, this side. Because I have to take a little bit because I'm trying to line up. I have to do it that you can't take from kit into one in there. There goes one. Then we've got our trim pieces here. That will go. Well, the trim pieces aren't going to work with the 357, so I can tell you that right now. So we're going to ignore those. And short screws. Those in there. Those just a little bit. There's not even a first pattern. Just how irons each. Make sure it's this model. A full 62 board. I thought you just like, there's no long cross, and that's okay. I need to see one. And it's not. You got yourself a flight fin. Now this is still loose. Well, not as loose as I'd like it to be, but I can loosen that up just a tad to adjust the height once I get it on the ground and get my foot under there and see how high on the flight fin I want this. And then I'll use a Phillips head to tighten it down. Last step will be well, not the last step, but the next step will be to get these rear flight fins on. Well, next I take you out the clamp where they was. Discard those. Now, I don't know if any else my time. Maybe it's on one. We're lost in my head. We'll do it on one. More research on it. Maybe more stuff careful with it. Not quite size. Those on there. Supposed to work on the ones. That is not going. So this has got opposite head. Use a bit more force here. Get that on. There we go. In there. In there. In there. So I'm going to put it out here. So you turn on the one. Close our cycle more than one next. So we've got flight fins. At this point, we can go ahead and flip it over and install the bumpers. So I've got my rear bumper and my front fangs. I'm going to go ahead and clean this rear bumper up a little bit. Get that guy in place. You've got 2 long screws and 4 short screws. So we'll go ahead, top off the Loctite on these. And I'll pre-launch this on after that. Get started, cross again. Get started, nice and down, so everything on. Okay, so I'm going to pull through there. And you can crisscross your slipping your small screws, aluminum, double on the tighten. So I want to have these things because if you vibrations, some things will come out. Now the rear fender's on. I'm going to go ahead and install the fangs. And the fangs, on the front fender, if you don't have fangs, there's a channel in here. So it just slides on like so. And then you give it a good whack. Get that aligned. Good to go there. This is the hardware that came with the fangs. So I'm using that. I'm going to use it because it is a bit slow on the aftermarket. I'm going to nothing critical are just easier to do it. We're going to go there and there. Last 2. These guys up front. Now this guy has to get a bit. I'm going to fit it. Those up. Some of these up. Now we got everything on there. Everything's looking good. We got tire clearance, flight fins. Now we're going to move the camera to the floor, and I'll go ahead and adjust these accordingly. I'm thinking they might be about right, but we'll find out. Stand by. So for the flight fins, These are the shoes I usually ride in. They are too low, so we'll go ahead and pull those up. It's a bit too high. That is perfect. That is locked in right there. We'll do the same on this side. Again, too low. Pull those up. Push it down just a tad. Locked in there. That is seriously locked in. That's awesome. I'm so excited. So now that that's done, we can go ahead and tighten these up. Make sure the back side's spinning. A little bit. You're only running flat, so you get ready. I'm basically feeling sure the bolt comes out and even up, so it should come to finish. That's all I did. So you got all of those feet good. Spin around, same on the side. And just on the back side, make sure both go through that. Make sure it's full engagement and come back good. It would want me, I'll show you how to invert it. But I think it will. It does not show that good. I know that's fine. As long as there's full engagement all over, there you go. There is one last step that we're going to do here, and that's leveling the board. So let me get that set up and I'll be back. Okay, so one of the final steps here is leveling the board. I've got the rails level and it's on a level trash can here. So that's about where I want it to ride. So the first step is going to be to open the NRF Connect app and then scan for the board. Well, you have to turn the board on first. So we'll start by turning the board on. Now that we confirm the board is on, now we can scan. There's the OneWheel. We'll go ahead and connect to that. It populates. We're connected. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect from that now. And then launch the OneWheel app. And that'll connect to our board. Now we can see that we're connected to the board there. So we go back to the NRF Connect and it says it's connected again. So now we're going to go to unknown service. It's going to try to scroll all the way down, stop that. And we're looking for E659302, which is right here. So this is our F302 that we're looking for right here. Go ahead and click the 3 arrows. That'll give us notifications on the board. Then click the up arrow and we're going to write value CB and send. And when I send this, it should flash green for a second. So that wrote. And then we're going to go to the F302 again and write a new value of CA. This is hard with only one hand. Hang on, I'm just going to set this down right here. CA. And then when we send this, it should, try to get this all in the same, it should flash green again, blink, and we are now recalibrated and leveled. The CBCB puts it into factory mode and the CACA reconnects everything. Now we're going to go ahead and disconnect from the NRF Connect app. And I'll go ahead and close that out. And then go ahead and, it's asking me for the firmware update. That's the scary one. We're going to go ahead and close out of that. But now our board should be ready to go after a quick power cycle. We're going to turn it off, turn it back on. Now we should be ready to go, completely recalibrated and level with our new 357 rails. The very last step is going to be installing the flight fender shield thing. I forget what they call it. They have a name for it, but the fender for the flight fins. So I'm going to put this back on the tripod so I can use both hands, and we'll see if we can get that on at this level or if we're going to have some clearance issues with the tire. So now that we're leveled, I'm done working on it. I'll go ahead and take this sticker off. Might even hit this with some alcohol to try to get some of that stickiness off. It'll wear off really quick, but I'll let the rest just wear off. Now, for the shield, we'll go down here, and you can kind of feel when it grabs. And we'll just bend this around here. Oh, it's trying to roll on me. Hang on, let me get some better leverage here. Start on this side. And we're going to bend this around, slide it down in there. Listen for the click. And it looks like we are going to have clearance issues. So there's going to be no fender. That's okay. That's it. Give you a quick overview, and then it's time to shred. So this is what we got. 357 T's, carbon rails, Fangs, Enduro tire, Lifesavers, titanium bolts, Hex 4mm grip with the gold inlays, flight fins, retainer clip down here. That's a good looking one wheel. Well guys, thanks for tuning in. It was a long video. I know it's random, but that's what I do. Just for the random stuff that I enjoy doing. Got my fully modified one wheel here. It engages quite nicely. Got all the mods on it. Everything's ready to go. Appreciate you watching. If you have any likes, concerns, dislikes, comments, questions, anything, leave a comment below. Please like, subscribe, turn the notifications on. Really appreciate it. It helps my channel. Trying to get more and more videos out of the random stuff I like to do. And until then, I guess it's time to one wheel. Thanks for tuning in, guys.